Our first speaker this afternoon is Pete Johnston. He lives and breathes timber heritage, and so I'm sure his presentation on the past, present, and future of timber heritage is going to be something else.
Good afternoon, Pete Johnston with Timber Heritage, currently president of Timber Heritage. Before I jump into a lengthy slideshow, shouldn't take over an hour and a half or so, just want to tell you a little bit about who I am. Born and raised here in Eureka. My father was the forester for a very large tract of land that encompassed the town of Falk. So growing up, Falk, behind the log gates, was our family playground. Weekends and weekend events with the family and weekend events with my dad's Boy Scout troop, we played around the town of Falk, and it really enamored me to the local history and started my passion for all things timber heritage. So I discovered the Timber Heritage Association in about 2000 when I came across one of Mike Kellogg's newsletters, the Whistle Punk, which is still a big part of our repertoire. Started acting as a building repairman out there when they acquired the Samoa Shops in 2007. About 2010 or so, I was so engaged in the organization and attending board meetings that they suckered me into being president. I was president for 3 years, and then that was taken over by Bruce Sievertson, sitting back here. And Bruce got knocked out by our term limit, so I'm president once again, and it's a really fun thing. Wish I had more time. So, Timber Heritage Association, past, present, and future. Many of you are familiar with all the old photos of all the logging trains and those massive logs they used to cut with nothing but hand tools. And this photo in particular struck me how you know, when faced with a huge challenge, they welded 2 crosscut saws together, and it's just an amazing feat what they did back in the day. So that's what we're trying to interpret and celebrate. One of our big activities is up at Fort Humboldt. This is a little Falk locomotive from the town of Falk that runs on select every third Saturday at Fort Humboldt in the summertime. So our organization started out as a Northern Counties Logging Interpretive Association in 1972. I'm not going to let you read or memorize all those names. In 1979, the group former to Timber Heritage Association acquired their first locomotive, the Hammond 15, when it sat at Sequoia Park for 29 years, I believe, and the city wanted it out of there due to liability purposes. I think Rusty, are you in this picture? We have one of our gentlemen here who was back there in the day helping salvage that locomotive. The vast collection at that time was moved out to Glendale after getting kicked out of Redwood Acres. And the Glendale storage yard with rails and lots of room became the home of Northern Counties Logging Interpretive. And sure enough, after so many years there, they were getting kicked out of there as well. Here's the Whistle Punk newsletter that is still a very, it's a big part of our organization. Our treasurer and Mr. Do-It-All, Mike Kellogg, puts out a great publication quarterly. Something else around the year 2000, everybody knows about the Inside Track. If you've been in and around downtown Eureka, or now it's sitting out on the safety corridor next to Arcada Redwood. So that was a big move in 2000. Here's a shot of the Hammond Lumber Company at Samoa in 1947. From what I understand, it was the second largest mill in the world, with the first largest being Pacific Lumber down in Scotia. And as part of that complex, there was a pretty extensive collection of railroad shops, machine shop, boiler shop, car shed, and of course a wonderful little roundhouse. And there's the roundhouse today. if you can see, yeah, it's actually labeled the Samoa Cookhouse. I was going to point it out for reference, but a lot of people, myself included, born and raised here, been to the cookhouse dozens of times and never knew what the history was of the buildings down below the bluff. So in 2006, the Timber Heritage Association acquired the Samoa Shops, leasing them from the Harbor District. Here's our roundhouse in 1930. Historically, there were as many as 400 roundhouses, wooden roundhouses on the West Coast. As trains were being replaced with diesel trucks, they were all torn down, except 2. So there's 2 remaining. Ours is the oldest, circa 1893. Here it is in 2009. It looks like we just rolled the last locomotive in after a 2-year move from the Glendale site to back to Samoa. This is what it takes, and this is just the kind of the stuff we do on a regular basis at Timber Heritage, is move big, heavy things. Big, heavy, rusty things. Anyway, it's not easy, it's not cheap, but it is a dedicated group that it takes to pull these things off. There's a number 29 logging locomotive. I think this is at the Scotia Roundhouse. That's a Pacific Lumber locomotive. That's in our collection. I'm glad I found this shot. Center of the picture is Marcus Brown. Marcus was president of our organization from the early days up until like 2012, I believe. Marcus was an extremely passionate, driven individual, and really pulled what was the Northern Counties logging group into the Timber Heritage Association, and we owe a lot of our success to Marcus. Here's our roundhouse with that Hammond number 15, which ended up at Sequoia Park, and then to Redwood Acres, and then to Glendale, and now it's back at the roundhouse. Here's the number 15 being unloaded from Glendale, and it now sits in the center stall of the roundhouse in its former resting place. So that was an amazing success. There's a 29 getting ready to be pushed into the roundhouse. This is another acquisition, a great Pacific Lumber caboose that was down in Scotia. I'm proud to say that's John Humboldt in front of it. He's a former volunteer. John passed away a few years ago, so I was glad to find that shot as well. This little caboose was sitting in Scotia with major obstructions at each end and power lines overhead. Nobody knew how to move it. They talked to Timber Heritage. We figured it out and got it out to our Samoa site. Here's an ugly diesel locomotive that Timber Heritage acquired, I think with Marcus's help. This was a Arcada and Mad River Railroad locomotive for many years. It ended up back on the East Coast. It has 2 brand new Cat diesel engines underneath all that rust, so we thought if we could acquire it, it might pull an excursion train. So there's that locomotive today, restored by Timber Heritage volunteers. It's sitting out at the roundhouse. We have about 100 feet of track. It gets to get out and stretch its legs and run the engines every once in a while, but we're ready. Along with the Arcada Mad River diesel locomotive to tow the excursion train. This is the interior of these beautiful cars donated by a couple in Santa Rosa who were trying to start their own excursion train, but the writing was on the wall. They weren't gonna make it, so they donated these beautiful, beautiful cars to us, and they are gorgeous. There's the parlor car. In a perfect world, this is the steam locomotive that would tow our excursion train. This is a Pacific Lumber number 37. It's currently back in a railroad rebuild shop in Strasburg, Pennsylvania, awaiting another, let's say $650,000 for the rebuild. A big part of what we do at Timber Heritage is working on the shops. Our agreement with the Harbor District was was $40,000 a year in labor and in volunteer labor and materials as our rent. We didn't owe them a nickel. If we could show we spent $40,000 worth of labor and materials per year, and we've met that obligation every year since we took the shops over. This is definitely a before picture of the Samoa Shops. There you can see the roofs look like Swiss cheese. The roofs are really dilapidated. Some of these buildings were really on the verge of being torn down when we salvaged them. And that's supposed to be a roof. Here we are on one large section, the last section we tackled here a couple years ago. Tearing the old roof, 3 layers of roofing, 1,000,001 roofing nails that had to be pulled. The Humboldt Builders Exchange came out for a large work party in 2012. It was an amazing day of, you know, I don't know how many, couple hundred volunteers and timber heritage people. Just got tons of work done on the Samoa Shops. It was really a rewarding day, so wanted to include that. Here's a section of the shop's roof in a before picture, and there's an after picture. That was a blacksmith shop at the end of the machine shop. Here's our roundhouse, 2007 or so. There it is, 2018. And there it is, open house at one of our yearly events. What else do? We do a lot of fundraising. Our Roundhouse Rendezvous is a large fundraiser every spring. Dinner auction, we have a lot of fun with that, really good community support. Just this past year we sold out. We're trying to think of a bigger venue than Sequoia Conference Center, but it's a beautiful place and we'll probably stay there and just try to squeeze more people in. What else do we do? This is the state of the tracks before we started our speeder car rides. You can see it's a jungle out there. Dedicated volunteers. This is also the CAL FIRE crew that we have a great relationship with. We buy their time and have their guys help us out as well. And that's so we can run our speeder cars. These were little motor units back from the 30s and 40s that ran workers out to the woods. And how many people in the room, show of hands, how many people have ridden the speeder? Right on, right on. Good to see. It's pretty fun. Pretty dang fun. Along the shores of Humboldt Bay, Old Town Eureka, Old Town next to the Carson Mansion, out on the bay by Samoa. It's really fun, really successful. Because we take it on trailers, we can go anywhere. We cleared the tracks up to the tunnel in Lolita. This was a shot taken a couple years ago. There it is going across the Lolita trestle. Aren't those drone photos great? It's amazing. We can't get enough, even when it's not speeder season, we put the speeder on the trailer and decorate it. There it is in the rhododendron parade. There it is in the truckers parade. We have a lot of fun, a lot of dedicated volunteers. What else do we do? Back to Fort Humboldt. You're very familiar with that sign. Donkey Days, that's not the four-legged donkey, that's the steam donkey, celebrating John Dolbear and his invention of 1881 right here in Eureka. Fort Humboldt, that's the Bear Harbor. That's many of you have ridden the little passenger car behind that. Very popular. As soon as we start tooting those whistles, you can hear them all over Eureka, and the people come. So, what else? Salmon, oysters, ales, and rails. It's a big barbecue event out at the Samoa Shops. And this was a joint venture with the Clark. It started as a joint venture and then morphed into a timber heritage event. We have a lot of fun with it. It's kind of increased every year. Vendors, lots of happy volunteers. And of course the speeder rides are adjacent right to our Samoa Shop facility. So, and people who come on that particular day, you're buying a ticket at 12:30 for your 3 o'clock ride. It's that backed up. We're trying to figure out how to squeeze more people or get another speeder car. Also at Samoa, it's not only all railroads, it's also the We have some amazing artifact collections from the timber industry, and that's really closer to my roots, with my father being a forester and working in the woods. This is the Denny Hess collection, or part of it. Denny Hess, who owned Break Hut International, knew about us because I bugged him for years and years, and he finally said, "Pete, come and get all this stuff." So anyway, that was an amazing donation to our collection. Here's some of our volunteers. I wanted to include this shot. In the middle is Thaddeus. On the far right is Carl Mueller. Carl is currently going through some chemotherapy, so we are pulling for Carl. Carl's also highlighted in the kinetic sculpture book I think you're going to hear about later today. A big part of our summer barbecue has always been the Boy Scouts. They help out with parking. And the young man on the far left is my son. This must have been a few years ago because I just sent him off to college. As an Eagle Scout, by the way. Here's a great shot of our President Bruce. Bruce Severson, where are you? Raise your hand. He didn't leave, did he? There's Bruce. Bruce was president for 4 years. He and his wife, Michelle, really brought Timber Heritage to a whole new level with community outreach and professionalism. And our events went from a bunch of hillbillies organizing it to somebody who's really got us put together now. And thankfully, after Bruce's presidency run ended, he and his wife are still very involved, so we're like, thank you. The Good Old Boy Network's alive and well during our summer barbecue. This is some of our volunteers and the good old boys from Weaverville who run the Hit and Miss Engine Club. We've entertained car clubs out there at Samoa. We have acres of asphalt. It's going to be a perfect venue with when we clear some hurdles with the Harbor District on zoning and can really open up as a museum. It's going to be a great venue for those kind of things. What else do we do? This is the Falk locomotive, and I don't know, 500 feet of track at the local logging conference. Every other year, actually every year, the logging conference is either at Redwood Acres or in Ukiah, and we follow along with a semi-load truck of rail track and another semi-trailer pulling the Falk locomotive. I mean, this is a dedicated group, I'm telling you. And the reason we do it is for the smiles on the kids' faces. That's our payment. It's not a bunch of old white guys. We really enjoyed, this is Linda Nesbitt, also Renee Ross, who's active in a lot of these organizations, sitting right over there. Renee's an active member of our squad, and Linda here, she's all in. She runs the locomotives at Fort Humboldt. She's a fireman. She's a breath of fresh air. What else do? We do a lot of photo documenting, oral histories. That was kind of Renee's forte. Getting some of these oral histories and stories before some of these people are no longer with us, you know, just documenting a lot of that local timber history. This is a kind of a jumbled shot of a lot of, I'm going to call them pattern molds that used to go to the Acme Eureka Foundry. Pacific Lumber donated them to us years ago, pattern molds. And this was the crew that went down to Pacific Lumber up into a third-story loft with about an inch of black dust on everything and salvaged these pattern molds, a lot of them rail-related. Anyway, Timber Heritage volunteers put in over 10,000 hours a year. When we started tallying the number, we were all amazed, 10,000 hours a year plus. That was one of the fun artifacts, just a little open-end wrench. We love partnering with different groups. This was Native Sons presentation at the Clark Museum. That was real fun as part of the 100th anniversary of the railroad. And we had the Falk locomotive right in front of the Clark. We're still working on the roofs. Actually, we just finished them last year. There's a before, there's an after. So that was real rewarding to finish up those roofs. We helped with the logging locomotive display down at Scotia. The locomotive went to the Mount Tamalpais, but the rest of the articles came out to Timber Heritage. Timber Heritage volunteers working in Scotia. Timber Heritage volunteers. Like I said, our Roundhouse Rendezvous we're still doing, sold out. Interior of the shops, Samoa Shops. These are just grand old buildings, big timber frame buildings, really fun. Looking more and more like a museum. Inside of the shops, still doing our speeder car rides, very popular across the Slough Bridge. We're teamed up with the Rail Runner franchise here, trying to get him up and running. Love working with the trail people, Arcada Railway Trail. Some wonderful signs down on the Bayfront Trail if you haven't seen them. We partner with the Humboldt Historical Society. We also do trash pickup when we have to along the rails, partnering with the Eureka Police Department. We're out at Keat TV doing a session out there every year. We collaborate with some of these fun books. Dick Taylor chocolate, who knew? And now into the future, working on the property. I'm almost done, sorry. Working on the property purchase. We really want to get our Timber Heritage Museum at Samoa up and running. Little trolley car on the streets of Eureka, that's coming soon. Be looking for that. Eureka Lodging Alliance has been a great financial backer for that option. But wait, there's more. Here's an excursion train from, let's say 1950s, in local excursion train. Here's our number 7 pulling some cars across the Glendale Trestle. Here's our machine back in Pennsylvania getting restored. There's what we're going to tow it with. There's the cars. So in closing, there is a light at the end of the tunnel for our group. For our group and its goals of an excursion train and a Timber Heritage Museum. We can overcome obstacles just like they did. That's our logo for our shoreline special. So as the sun sets on the North Coast Railroad Authority and its domain of rails to the North Coast, we think the sun is rising on our goals here in Humboldt. So thank you very much. Sorry I went over a minute or two.